I'm marrying your best friend. We don't have a marriage license, and there's no distribution of property.
That's how it is, so best of luck to you. I'm taking the high-earning banker husband for myself. Right in front of me, my husband and best friend are laughing triumphantly, as if they've won some grand prize. It's shocking enough that my husband was cheating on me, but the fact that it was with my best friend is even more devastating. When he proposed to me, I was just a placeholder, a candidate for a housekeeper, nothing more. I let out a deep sigh and looked at the two of them with pity in my eyes. To them, I'm just a pathetic woman who can be tossed aside like a dirty rag. Wait, you didn't know?
Know what?
I won't even use endearing terms like my dear anymore. I decided to tell the smug pair the truth. I'll make them understand that when you look down on someone, it comes back to bite you in the end. I'm Victoria, 39 years old. 10 years ago, I met Thomas, a banker, at a singles event. He proposed, and we got married. I was worried that my plain appearance wouldn't be his type. But Thomas reassured me with kind words.
I wanted to choose a marriage partner based on what's inside. Please marry me.
Moved by his words, I decided to marry him. However, our married life wasn't smooth sailing. More than anything, my mother-in-law Ashley didn't approve of me. This girl has no charm, she sighed at our first family meeting. But Thomas defended me, saying,
Don't talk about the person I chose to marry like that.
So I decided to do my best to win Ashley over. Shortly before Thomas and I started dating, his father Stephen had passed away. She took advantage of him when he was down after losing Stephen. Otherwise, he could have found a much better girl. Ashley would grumble. She constantly made snide remarks about my plain appearance. Watching TV? What a cute girl. If only Stephen were here, that girl too, sigh. Thomas is so kind, he was tricked. She'd say things like, Still, I pretended not to hear and let it slide. Thomas would scold her, and he was kind to me, so our marriage lasted 10 years. One day, while shopping with Thomas at an outlet mall, I felt a tap on my shoulder from behind.
Hey there! Victoria, long time no see.
Kayla. The woman waving at me was Kayla, my best friend from middle school. Kayla was a lively, cute girl, and we used to hang out all the time. But her family moved away, and we hadn't seen each other since. Feeling nostalgic, we went to a nearby cafe to catch up. Surprisingly, she had maintained her beauty, not looking nearly 40. Kayla worked as a company employee. But apparently, she hadn't been lucky in finding a marriage partner. Marriage is all about compatibility, isn't it? I just haven't found the one yet. As she said this with a smile, Thomas was staring at Kayla intently.
So your name is Kayla? I never knew Victoria had such a beautiful friend.
Thank you. What does Thomas do for work?
He's a banker.
The moment she heard the word banker, I thought I saw a sparkle in Kayla's eyes.
So he's a high earner. Victoria, you caught yourself a great husband. I want to get to know him better.
Of course. Why don't you come over for coffee sometime?
Definitely. I'd love to.
Somehow the conversation moved forward without me, but I figured Thomas was just trying to befriend my best friend. When Kayla came over for coffee, we discovered that she and Thomas liked the same video game. Delighted, Thomas invited Kayla to play the game together. From that day on, she started coming over to our house frequently. She'd stay for hours on end, using gaming as an excuse. And they both would ignore me. If I was in the same room, they'd ask me to go buy snacks or clean the bathroom, trying to get rid of me.
Thomas, you're so good at this game. Ha ha ha, I'm honored to be praised by you.
I couldn't help but notice Kayla getting physically closer to Thomas, and he seemed thrilled. Ashley seemed to like Kayla.
Oh my, what a pretty girl, so different from Victoria.
Welcoming her, Ashley's attitude toward me grew even harsher. Ever since reuniting with her, I started feeling strongly alienated. Hey, aren't you and Kayla getting a bit too close?
That's not true. Don't be jealous just because you're plain.
Thomas wouldn't listen when I tried to point it out. They must have exchanged contact info privately because I got a message from Kayla. Being too controlling will make you a disliked wife, you know? With things like this, the more fun the two of them seemed to have, the more drained I felt. Thomas's behavior started getting stranger and stranger. Recently, likely at Kayla's suggestion, he bought a video game that could be played online and started playing it every night after work. That itself wasn't a problem, but whenever he got defeated in the game, he'd click his tongue and mutter things like,
"These cocky brats don't know their place. Damn newbies dragging us down. Cut the crap."
I really hated it when he says something like that. I knew he wasn't saying it to me, but just hearing such negative verbal abuse was subtly stressful. At least he wasn't taking it out on objects or me. For the time being, as soon as Thomas started his tirade, I'd escape to the next room and listen to music with earphones. It was a tolerable situation, but dealing with it day after day was exhausting. Why did Thomas insist on playing such a frustrating game for hours every single day? However, when Kayla was logged in and playing with him, he was in a good mood. I shouldn't have minded my best friend and husband getting along, but deep down I was dissatisfied. On top of that, Thomas's irritation seemed to be growing as his colleague at the bank started getting praised for landing a big contract. When Thomas would vent to me about work, "I see, that sounds rough," I'd give generic responses. I'm not well versed in the banking profession, but if I tried to give advice, he'd snap at me.
"Don't act like you know what you're talking about."
But he wouldn't extend the same courtesy to me. When I'd consult him about a mistake I made,
"You are so hopeless,"
he'd say with a contemptuous, condescending tone. This man had no intention of offering me kind words. Realizing this, I focused on him and stayed silent for a while, and he awkwardly went to the bedroom. Around this time, my relationship with Thomas started gradually deteriorating. Moreover, he started disparaging my cooking as well.
"Stew and sautéed spinach again? I don't want to eat this kind of food anymore."
Don't say that. You're not getting enough vegetables as it is.
"I don't want to eat this anymore. I'm going out to eat."
As the distance between us grew, Thomas proportionately increased the frequency of his contact with Kayla. He seemed to be going out for coffee with Kayla often, which I found unpleasant. "Hey, are you going to see Kayla again? You're a married man, so I wish you'd think about it a little."
"What's with you? Are you the one having dirty fantasies?"
When I tried to stop Thomas, he just got in a bad mood.
"I'm just giving her advice as a gaming buddy, so don't worry."
Kayla said that, trying to reassure me, but an anxious feeling spread in my chest. To the point where I was worried he wouldn't drop his overbearing attitude. He started bad-mouthing people within earshot, you see. When we went to a family restaurant for a limited-time steak fare, a father with 2 children sat next to us. Both children were really cute, friendly, and greeted us when we made eye contact, creating a warm atmosphere throughout the restaurant. I was ordering from the waiter, but Thomas seemed to have overheard the family next to us and spoke to me in a somewhat condescending manner. "Looks like a single father. With that, he can't expect to earn much."
"Hey! What are you suddenly saying that?"
Maybe his wife ran out on him. He's still wearing a ring on his ring finger, so he's probably hung up on her. A vicious look appeared on Thomas's face. Was he always the kind of person to make a face like this?
"He probably has his own circumstances, so don't say things like that so lightly."
He seemed to get annoyed when I cautioned him in a low voice. Next, Thomas spoke to the children. "You don't have a mom? That's so sad." The father answered with a wry smile. "She passed away from an illness last year. I'm sorry for bringing up such a somber topic."
"Of course she did. What, so she didn't run out on you? How boring. I'm leaving before the misfortune rubs off on me."
Normally, you'd apologize for making them talk about such a thing. I was so embarrassed, my face felt like it was on fire. How could he say something like that? The exchange was overheard by the restaurant staff too, and I couldn't bear to stay there any longer. After apologizing to the family, I left the restaurant as desired. Fortunately, since we had just ordered, I was able to cancel before they started preparing the food. When we got home, I confronted Thomas.
"Why would you say something like that? Did you not think it was rude? But it's the truth, isn't it? And what, are you siding with that poor family because you're fooling around with that father?"
I was shocked that Thomas would say something so outrageous. He wasn't the kind of person to say things like this before. I was starting to lose sight of a future living with Thomas. When it rains, it pours. Ashley slipped and fell on a slope during her walk and broke a bone. The surgery was successful, but she had to do her rehabilitation at home. Automatically, it fell to me to take care of Ashley, but even with me nursing her, Ashley wouldn't drop her self-centered behavior.
Hurry up and bring me my food. You're such a slow wife.
Ashley, walking to the living room is part of your rehabilitation too.
Well, you're going to make a frail old woman walk. What a terrible wife.
Ashley wouldn't move at all and tattled on me to Thomas for everything, so I got scolded by Thomas when he came home every day.
Hey, Mom can't move right now. Don't you feel sorry for her, having such an inconsiderate wife?
But the doctor said if she doesn't move, her legs will stiffen up.
I don't want to hear excuses. Anyway, I won't forgive you if anything happens to Mom.
Even though Thomas, her actual son, doesn't do anything himself. Honestly, it's a huge burden for me to take care of her alone. Thomas said my exhausted appearance was gloomy and stopped coming home, using work as an excuse. Even when I talked to Kayla.
You have to take good care of Thomas's mom. That's a wife's duty, right?
She'd say that and take Thomas's side. My mental stress kept piling up. After half a year, I had lost 50 pounds from taking care of her. Thanks to my care, Ashley can walk a little around the neighborhood now. I was originally on the plump side, but I suddenly dropped below average. It wasn't by choice, and it was a mentally painful way to lose weight, so looking in the mirror, rather than feeling thin, I'd say I looked haggard from lack of sleep. One holiday, I looked in the mirror and thought I had to do something about my miserable appearance. I lost 50 pounds in 6 months taking care of your mom. So, I want to buy clothes that fit me now. Could you watch Ashley this Saturday?
You're home all the time, so whatever clothes are fine, right? You're not thinking of leaving Mom with me to go cheat, are you? You should thank Mom for improving your figure.
This is what they mean by your jaw dropping. I've been taking care of Ashley and doing the housework for 2 months, but this man says I can't even leave Ashley with him for one day to go buy clothes that aren't baggy on me now or get my hair cut when it's grown out. Just what am I to this man? Do I have to endure this miserable feeling of not even getting a single kind word? Thinking that, tears welled up and I started sobbing. Thomas looked utterly disgusted and didn't comfort me.
Hey, cut it out. You're being gross, old lady. It's time.
Saying that, he left the room. And he came back with Kayla. Kayla clung to Thomas's arm and looked down on me. It clearly wasn't the behavior of a normal acquaintance. And then Thomas said something outrageous.
I'm marrying your best friend. I never submitted the marriage license, and there won't be any division of assets.
Thomas raised his chin with a triumphant look, and Kayla said, That's how it is, so best of luck to you. I'm taking the high-earning banker husband. Looking smug. It was shocking enough that Thomas was cheating, but the fact that it was with Kayla, who I thought was my best friend, was even more devastating. Kayla had gotten close to Thomas to snag him, a banker, after all. She kept saying things Thomas wanted to hear to get on his good side.
Thomas, you're so good at games too. If you thoroughly beat those selfish kids, you'll be even cooler. With your background, no one can act high and mighty.
She kept flattering him like this, so Thomas got carried away and became selfish. And when he wasn't coming home, Kayla was preparing his favorite foods and winning him over through his stomach. I had my doubts about Thomas's recent transformation, but it finally made sense. What do you mean, you didn't submit the marriage license?
To be honest, I lived with you to have you do the housework and take care of my mom. If a good woman ever showed up, I could switch over without any damage since there's no record of marriage or asset division, right?
Thomas gleefully revealed his scheme.
Actually, I wanted to kick you out as soon as I met Kayla. But my mom's bone fracture was an irregular event, so I kept you around. But if you're going to defy me this much, I'll have you leave the house.
Since we didn't submit the marriage license, we can get married without a previous marriage on record, and we don't have to waste money on dividing assets with you. Thomas, you're a genius. Apparently, after our wedding ceremony, Thomas didn't submit the marriage license to the city hall.
City hall is far, so I'll submit it for you.
I was a fool for believing Thomas's words. After arguing with me, It seems Thomas went to City Hall with Kayla and submitted their marriage license. Of course, since he hadn't submitted one with me, the two of them easily became husband and wife. Kayla decided to quit her job. As if to rub it in my face, Thomas took out the marriage license we had filled out 10 years ago and ripped it to shreds. Kayla, why did you betray me? We were best friends, right?
To be honest, you were just there to make me look good. Someone like you doesn't deserve a high-earning husband like Thomas. There weren't many good men at those singles events, you know.
Guess it just goes to show there was a woman better suited for me out there. So get out. We're starting our real newlywed life. I see, I was the only one who thought we were best friends. A quiet laugh wells up from the back of my throat.
Finally facing reality, huh? So, what are you gonna do? You don't have much money. Will you be homeless or stay in a hotel?
Oh no, how sad. Well, you were in an unbalanced marriage, so it can't be helped. I let out a deep sigh and looked at the two of them with pity in my eyes. Wait, you didn't know?
Know what?
I won't even use endearing terms like my dear anymore. I decided to tell the smug pair the truth.
I have assets of $1 million. So, you don't need to worry about my livelihood.
Looks like you finally lost it. When Thomas heard my words, he burst out laughing, likely thinking it was just sour grapes. It can't be helped. Considering how I've been until now, it's only natural he'd think that.
I haven't lost it. And I knew you hadn't submitted the marriage license. Huh?
One day while I was caring for Ashley, I cleaned Thomas's room since he wasn't coming home. That's when I found something like a wooden safe in the back of the closet. He must have been using a pretty old one because the lid opened while I was cleaning and I saw inside. The contents were a marriage license with our names filled in. Why in the world was this here? Wasn't it supposed to be submitted to City Hall? If he had simply forgotten to submit it, it wouldn't be stashed away so securely like this. My mind was in a state of confusion. I couldn't just ask Thomas about it, and I didn't want him to get suspicious, so I put the marriage license back where it was. While I was trying to figure out Thomas's intentions, I overheard Ashley talking to Thomas on speakerphone.
So, are things going well with that girl?
Yeah, I'll be kicking out that wife of mine soon.
I see, you're a smart one. Still, to not notice you didn't submit the marriage license, she really is a dull wife. But thanks to that, our precious assets won't go to her, so it's fine.
I couldn't believe it. I married Thomas because I loved him, but he never intended to from the start. Using taking care of you as an excuse, she's become such a mess with frizzy hair and stains everywhere. Glasses and no makeup. To be blunt, her appearance has gotten even worse. Someone like that is a failure as my wife. Hearing those words from Thomas sent a chill down my spine. The voice coming through the speaker was far too cold. This solved the mystery of the marriage license in the safe. At this rate, I'll be kicked out in tatters. Thinking that, I bought a used computer and started honing my skills to become independent. Besides taking care of Ashley, I spent almost all my time at home fiddling with the computer. I bought programming textbooks at the bookstore, pored over them, and put them into practice. In no time, my table was filled with books on programming languages. I must have had an affinity for programming languages like Java and C++ because I started developing apps. While learning advertising techniques for social media, I released several small one-off games that became hits and started generating revenue. By strategically distributing gameplay videos, I started earning ad revenue from there as well. Thanks to that, I started receiving programming requests from companies. As my income surpassed the scope of a sole proprietorship, I created a company in my name and put the money there. And it's not like an app is finished once it's released to the world. Maintenance and frequent updates are necessary, and it seems my diligent handling of that is well received. Even while being worked to the bone by Ashley, I had a goal, so I was able to persevere until now. I also managed my savings. I had deposited them in Thomas's bank, but I used online banking, so I didn't have to go to the bank in person very often. I had asked the bank not to tell Thomas, so he didn't know I was earning money. With this, I could leave this house whenever I wanted. And half a year later, Thomas revealed that he hadn't submitted the marriage license. When I explained this far, Thomas was flustered.
Huh? What? I didn't know that. I didn't tell you. But after being treated like this, I can't afford to be considerate of you. Maybe I should tell the bank about the money situation and have them let me withdraw it all at once. Wait. If you do that, I'll get in trouble.
Thomas tried to cling to me, but I no longer had any feelings for him.
Actually, you deceived me by hiding that you were earning so much. I'll sue you. It's super unfair that you have that much money. I pretty much took care of your husband, so give me compensation for that.
The two of them must have lost all common sense somewhere, taking such a brazen attitude.
That's not even funny. And Thomas, you and I were strangers to begin with. Even if it was a common law marriage, I have your deeds written in my diary and I recorded that conversation just now on my smartphone. You can't touch my assets.
Saying that, I took my prepared luggage and left the house with the two of them screaming behind me. After that, I received a barrage of phone calls. From Thomas, a voice mixed with a wheedling tone.
Hey, you worked hard to be recognized by me, right? That money, if you're with me, we could put it to more effective use, don't you think?
From my best friend, a condescending voice. Hey, you were working hard because you have no charm. But give me $1 million as a gift.
There's a brand bag I want, Yusita.
And from Ashley, a voice scolding me no matter what.
Wait, what is this? I had absolutely no idea you were earning money. Pay me $100,000 in compensation for lying.
Just listening to it was exhausting.
Please do the housework and everything else yourself from now on. I won't help. According to you, I'm a woman who tricks men by preying on their weaknesses, so it's best we cut ties, right? How dare you? What an impudent wife. I'm not your wife anymore. Also, part of the living expenses was my earnings, but I'm stopping that too. Thomas hates giving money, but do your best to make do somehow on your own.
While taking care of Ashley, there were various expenses, but Thomas hardly ever tried to pay. With me gone, their standard of living will drop considerably. Will Ashley be able to endure that? One more thing, Ashley's leg isn't fully healed. Thomas didn't even come to the hospital visits, so he probably doesn't know, but Ashley's muscles have weakened, and if she doesn't move a lot, she'll become bedridden. I encouraged and pleaded with Ashley to get her to walk somehow, but Ashley loves slacking off to begin with. Thomas will find it a pain and won't do it, and there's no way Kayla will lend a hand. Ashley, it's best to have you walk as much as possible. I won't be responsible if you can't walk anymore.
Humph, a threat? Thanks to you, Mom is doing well. Thanks.
That's how I was mocked at the time of divorce. Thomas probably thought it was just sour grapes on my part. I gave my warning, so it's no longer any of my business. Later, it seems Thomas tried his hand at investing but failed. How do I know? Because Thomas told me he needs a $7,000 margin call by 3 p.m. today, and it'll be pretty bad if he can't come up with it, so he wants me to lend it to him. When I flatly refused, persistent texts and calls came.
Please! You have money, don't you? Do something! This is what you get for messing with investments without proper knowledge. My money isn't there to cover your screw-ups. But if someone like you can earn $1 million, there's no way I can't.
Just how far did he look down on me? I don't want to exhaust myself mentally for Thomas's sake anymore. I tried to push back.
Impossible.
Against his demand with a firm.
Then at least lend me money. I'll do it right this time.
No.
There's no guarantee I'll get it back, and I don't want to get involved any further. Don't fuck with me. Don't act so high and mighty.
I was so stunned when he started shouting at me after his crying tactic failed that I just hung up on him and ignored it. I did record part of it and consulted the police, just in case.
It's not uncommon for divorced spouses to persistently pester their ex when they're struggling financially. We'll increase patrols, just to be safe.
They assured me of that, so I felt relieved for the moment. By the way, with stocks, if you don't pay the margin call, you'll be forced to settle. If the settlement puts you in the red, it becomes debt. Well, if the trades you're doing keep falling, putting in a margin call will just make your debt swell even more, so there are times when it's better to force a settlement without putting in a margin call. If the value recovers, it's better to put in a margin call, but I doubt Thomas understands that balance. If a forced settlement isn't enough, it can turn into debt, but there's also a chance it won't. But judging from how flustered he was, I think it's a case of him using money he shouldn't, like living expenses. I also invest with my accumulated funds, so I have some knowledge. You won't suffer huge losses with stocks as long as you don't buy or sell in strange ways. But if you try to make a lot of money in a short time, it becomes like gambling. Thomas isn't the patient type or the type who can see ahead. If I were beside him, I probably would have opposed it and stopped him, but it's no longer any of my business. A week later, I was considering buying a new car to cut expenses. But when I logged into my online bank, I had a feeling the balance was a bit lower. This was clearly strange, so I headed to the bank. When I checked my account at the counter, the staff hurriedly retreated to the back. And then the branch manager came out in a fluster. "Ms. Bill, we deeply apologize, but upon confirming the facts..." The manager wiped the sweat from his brow and told me that Thomas had illegally logged into my online account, withdrawn my assets, and transferred them to his own account. Thomas was certainly in a position to log into my account information, so he probably tried to secretly skim some to cover his failed investments. He should know that doing something like that as a bank employee wouldn't end well. The branch manager called Thomas in, but Thomas was sullenly defiant.
"But that money belongs to me as her husband, right? Her hiding it until now is the malicious part. So I confiscated it. You got a problem with that? You and I were never really married in the first place. Don't go spouting convenient nonsense now. We're complete strangers. This is the crime of embezzling a customer's money. What the hell, don't get cheeky." "Branch manager, you don't have to listen to her. I just received it as divorce compensation."
Then the branch manager's shouts echoed in the meeting room.
"What on earth are you saying? Do you not think this is outrageous? Huh? What? Did I do something that bad?"
On top of embezzlement, Thomas spewed words that were far too rude to me as a customer, so the branch manager scolded him. Of course, this wasn't something that could be hidden, so they decided to contact the police. Only then did Thomas's face turn pale as he started to panic.
"What? The police? Why? I've been working for this bank all this time. Did you really think you could get away with pulling something like this?"
There was an exchange of shouts in the meeting room, and in the end, Thomas was taken away by the police. Thomas's assets couldn't cover it, so the bank shouldered part of the repayment. It became enough of an incident to be covered in the local newspaper, and he was fired. He had gained trust in the neighborhood as a banker, but that all went down the drain, and apparently he couldn't live in that house anymore. With no money, he moved to a cheap apartment while looking for work. But since his real name was published in the newspaper, companies that found the article turned him away at the door.
"If you had just stayed quiet, I would have been rich by now. My career is in shambles. I didn't even get severance pay."
I blocked his calls, so he sent resentful texts one after another, but I ignored them all. Kayla also persistently contacted me.
"You're not doing some petty harassment, are you? Thanks to you, being a banker's wife is over. You're looking down on us because we don't have money, aren't you?"
I guess their mental dictionaries don't include the word personal responsibility. By the way, with the branch manager's sincere apology, I decided to continue keeping my money at that bank. He was the one at fault, after all. I decided to forget about Thomas and the others for the time being and focus on my own work. When I started investing the money I earned, it must have gone well because now it's around $5 million. My workload started becoming more than I could handle alone, so I recruited staff online. Then graduate students and skilled engineers gathered. Among them was a familiar face, the single father. The one Thomas had mocked at the family restaurant back then. He said he started working as an engineer so he could take care of his children while working from home.
"I'm still far from being able to replace their mother, but I still want to make sure my children don't have to struggle."
I apologized for Thomas's former rudeness. He said those words actually motivated him to work even harder, forgiving me, but at the time, I was so embarrassed my face felt like it was on fire. While I was diligently running the company, I ran into Thomas by chance on my way back from a client. His appearance had changed so much, I didn't realize it was him at first. When he saw me, his eyes lit up and he suddenly started pleading with me in the middle of the street.
Victoria? It's Victoria, right? Please! Listen to me.
What the?
Stop it.
Aware of the eyes around us, I decided to hear Thomas out at a cafe near the police box. In the end, his goal was to demand money and get back together. Apparently, even when Thomas manages to find a job, it doesn't go well. He got addicted to an online game he was hooked on and developed a habit of verbal abuse, so he ends up using rough language in the real world too. I warned him so much, but it must have become a habit he can't quit. Moreover, his daily meals are miserable.
All natural.
And
Authentic high-end.
all she can make on her own are oily dishes with olive oil and cheese. What she had been preparing until now was just frozen foods arranged colorfully. As a result, Thomas is obese with acne-riddled, oily skin. I had heard that eating greasy foods makes acne worse, so I had been honing my healthy cooking skills. Meals with too much fat are tough on elderly people like Ashley, and even for young people. Eating it every day is a shortcut to chronic illness. He had become impressively unhealthy. Kayla herself splurges and eats out all the time. It's expensive, so no matter how much they work, it's hard to save money. Plus, olive oil isn't cheap enough to buy multiple bottles. Kayla started using vegetable oil and sesame oil as an arrangement and adding vinegar because it's healthy, making the flavors even more disastrous. Kayla, who planned to enjoy a celebrity lifestyle after switching places with me, had completely gone to seed. She got fed up with her overweight, middle-aged husband and cheated with another man, but the wife found out and is apparently demanding compensation. With compensation payments and mounting expenses, the in-laws ended up in debt.
If you weren't around, I'd be enjoying a fun retirement by now. If Victoria were here, we'd be billionaires.
Ashley makes snide remarks to Kayla every day, and their marriage is in shambles. Kayla's former beauty is nowhere to be seen. Ashley too, if she tried hard at rehab, she could regain mobility, but she slacks off because it's a pain, so she's become unable to walk again, making her even more incapacitated. Rather, did they really think I would provide financial assistance after being so spiteful?
I can't cook, and just looking at Kayla's cooking makes my stomach shrink. Mom can't move anymore, we have no money, my body is being torn apart. Help me!
I do feel sorry for him, but I haven't forgotten being told my cooking was bland. By the way, apparently the soup gets an inch-thick film of oil on top, so the greasiness must be pretty bad.
No way! I'm not a caregiver, housekeeper, or ATM. Then hire me at your company and make me an executive. How shameless can you be?
I rejected Thomas's pleas. Victoria sighed as she walked out of the restaurant, wondering how anyone could possibly want to return to such a hellish marriage. Thomas, with a look of desperation on his face, pleaded.
Yes, I cheated, but it was only one time. If you round it to the nearest whole number, it's basically 0. So technically, I haven't cheated at all. Let's start over as husband and wife. I'll dump that woman, I swear.
However, as expected, since he faked the submission of a marriage license, what he said was wrong. Victoria ignored the single father and walked out of the store. Suddenly, Richard started shaking and convulsing. If she still loved him, she would have rushed to his aid or called an ambulance in a panic. But as she observed him with a cold gaze,
"Help me!"
he cried out, glancing at her from the corner of his eye. She was so exasperated that she couldn't say a word. When Victoria stepped outside, he frantically chased after her but retreated when she entered the police car. Victoria had recorded her conversation with Richard just in case and sent it to Kayla.
He said, "Let's get married again, but we were never married in the first place, and your husband is contacting me." What? He's betraying me.
It's ironic that Kayla is acting strange, considering she also cheated on Richard. Despite being newlyweds, Kayla and Richard's relationship seemed to have soured quickly. I hired new security guards and deleted their contact information. Thanks to stocks and investments, my company is now operating smoothly without facing financial difficulties. The single father employees can apparently cover their children's tuition and living expenses with their salaries from the company. Although her days are filled with hard work, honestly, her life is much more fulfilling than when I was with Thomas. Boss, I need you to look at this program.
All right, I'm coming.
Victoria put her worn-out programming reference book in her desk drawer and headed over to her subordinate. Plagued by the constant snide comments from my MIL, Brittany, and Fael, Christopher, since the beginning of my marriage and harassed for not being able to have children, I was at my wit's end. Even my supposed support, my husband, David, would say, "Kayla, my Isael, is young and beautiful, and unlike Misty, she gave birth to children right away. I really envy my brother, William." And that's how things ended up. To make matters worse, Brittany accused me of infidelity as the reason for our childlessness, claiming,
"Misty is cheating, so I caught evidence with a hidden camera."
Such an outrageous statement was made. That's when I devised a plan. I gathered all the relatives under the guise of my nephew, Mike's birthday party, and decided to play the so-called evidence of infidelity that Brittany mentioned. Upon seeing that, Kayla, David, and Christopher each uttered,
"Just as I thought,"
with faces filled with despair. My name is Misty, 34 years old. I work in the international division of a medium-sized trading company. I live with David, who is the same age as me and works for a steel manufacturer, along with Brittany and Christopher. We don't have any children yet. I met David at a street mixer I was invited to by a friend. I was in my 4th year at the job, finally getting the hang of things and starting to find the work interesting, though I wasn't much interested in marriage. However, a college friend insisted, and I couldn't refuse. Thus, my interest was primarily in the special menus prepared by each store for the street mixer. I felt a bit detached from my more socially active friends, but that's where I met David, who had come along with one of those friends. David, as it turned out, wasn't too keen on the event either and had been dragged along reluctantly. So, as outsiders, we ended up sticking together, but I intended our association to be just for that occasion and deliberately did not exchange contact information. However, exactly 1 week after the street mixer, on a Friday, I received a call on my mobile phone from an unknown number. I ignored it at first, but after work hours, the calls came every 10 minutes.
"What on earth is this all about?"
Irritated, I was about to block the number, but before I did, I decided to at least find out who was calling me so incessantly, and answered the phone. The call was from David, whom I had met at the street mixer.
"Ah, good. You're Misty, right?"
It was a relief to find out who was behind the unknown nuisance calls, but I hadn't given David my number at that time. Suspicious.
"I got this number by begging a friend who was there with us,"
he explained. It seemed my friend, who had hit it off with his male companion, decided to start dating after meeting at the street mixer. Meanwhile, David, who had failed to ask for my contact details, learned about this from his companion and managed to get my number by pestering his friend. Despite being dismayed by my friend who casually shared my number and David for taking advantage of that, I somehow started dating David, and a year later, he proposed, and we decided to get married. It wasn't a passionate love affair, but I thought I could live peacefully with him, who had a somehow gentle and endearing personality. There were no issues on my end regarding the marriage. My parents had been living separately since I entered university. They never divorced, apparently because there was no particular benefit to doing so at this point. Friends and acquaintances would ask if I wasn't lonely, but considering my parents were essentially living separately under the same roof, I saw their situation as an inevitable outcome. Still, they paid for my university tuition, so during long breaks, I would visit both my father's and mother's homes, but after starting my job, I mostly just reported my well-being through social media, using work as an excuse. When I told my parents I was getting married, they said they would attend the wedding if we had one, but when I told them, "We're just going to register the marriage and not do anything special," they later sent me a generous gift of money, which was more than enough for me. However, Brittany and Christopher seemed dissatisfied with my parents.
Settling their only daughter's marriage with money seems quite unreasonable.
Indeed. It's worrisome to think about the future. That's what they painfully said to me. But David defended me, saying,
"Money is a perfectly valid expression of love. It's strange for Mom, who has never worked, to say that. If Dad knows how hard it is to earn money, he shouldn't say things like that either."
That made me truly glad I had chosen him. However, about 4 years into our marriage, things began to take a turn for the worse. The initial cause was my promotion. I had been working hard in my assigned department since joining the company, and when I took the promotion exam that year. "Misty, you said during your job interview that you wanted to work globally in the future, right? How about gaining some experience in the international division first?" That's what I was told. I was thrilled that my hard work was recognized and assumed that I could share this joy with David. However, upon hearing my news, David visibly soured.
I see. And what do you want to say with that? I got promoted. I'm so great.
And he barked. Shocked by his unexpected reaction, I wondered if I had said something to upset him and apologized. "Sorry, that wasn't my intention." But David retorted,
"Acting all meek like that is proof you're mocking me, isn't it?"
He roughly threw his half-finished can of beer into the trash and stormed out of the condo, slamming the door behind him. He didn't return for a week. He wouldn't read messages on his mobile phone, nor would he answer calls. I even tried calling his office, but he was out, and all I could learn was that he was at least safe. I thought about waiting for him outside his office, but that would have been too embarrassing for him. So, I went to my in-laws, Brittany and Christopher, to seek advice. I expected to be scolded, but it was my only option. Despite the sudden visit, I was surprised at how smoothly I was received, but as soon as I stepped into the living room, David, who had been waiting, lashed out.
"What do you want now? Came to mock me some more?"
I froze, bombarded by his harsh words. Of course, I immediately said that wasn't my intention and apologized for any misunderstanding, but he wouldn't listen. To make matters worse, Brittany and Christopher joined in, berating me.
"Thinking you can act all high and mighty just because you work too? Don't you know that's not how a wife should behave? This is why we were against marrying someone from an uncultured family."
They shouted just as loudly as David. From there, it was a never-ending lecture on how I was at fault for hurting David's pride. Eventually, "David has no intention of returning to the condo you two lived in. If you don't want a divorce, leave that condo and come live here with us. We'll retrain you in how to be a proper wife to our son," was their demand. In hindsight, I wonder why I didn't just say, "Then divorce is fine," at that moment. But at that time, I still had feelings for David, and having grown up watching my parents live as a married couple in name only, I probably didn't understand what a marriage was supposed to be, reflecting misguidedly. Soon after, I did as Brittany suggested and left the condo to live with my in-laws. They were very pleased, but the reason soon became clear. William, David's brother who is 3 years younger than him, had been living with the in-laws, but about 3 months before my promotion, he had said, "I've found a girlfriend and will be moving out to live on my own," and left the family home. Until then, Brittany, who had adored William for graduating from a university ranked higher than David's, was shocked by the unforeseen event of William moving out. But the problem wasn't just the shock. The financial contributions William had been making to the household were a significant issue. They were prideful and loved to show off, often gathering relatives to flaunt expensive wines and meals. Obviously, Christopher's earnings from re-employment after retirement couldn't cover everything, and the money William contributed was their last hope. That's the real reason they convinced David, who came home complaining about me, to move in together. David, feeling inferior to his more successful brother, suddenly enjoyed being fussed over. When I realized this, it made sense, but bad things kept happening. Soon after, William married his girlfriend, but my new sale, Kayla, turned out to be the worst. Kayla was 6 years younger than William and 2 years younger than David and me. She appeared fragile and delicate, exactly the type that triggers men's instinct to protect. That was true for Christopher and David too. They became noticeably unsettled every time Kayla visited, acting like her entourage. Naturally, Brittany wasn't pleased and took it out on me.
The reason David is smitten with Kayla is because you lack appeal. If you just showed us a grandchild, even Christopher would regain his composure as a grandfather, she said. She even demanded that I quit my job and focus on preconception care. However, due to Brittany and Christopher's wasteful spending, the household expenses only increased, and David's salary couldn't cover everything. Even when I showed them the household budget and explained this, "It's all because you're bad at managing money. Always making excuses,"
they wouldn't listen, just repeating their criticisms of me. Around that time, Kayla got pregnant. Even Brittany, who had disliked Kayla, caught grandchild fever once she learned the child would be William's. She doted on the newborn grandson, Mike, immensely. That led to Brittany eagerly welcoming Kayla's visits, which she had previously avoided, even saying,
"Oh, how wonderful it would be to live under the same roof as such a cute grandchild."
David even chimed in, "That's true.
Kayla is young and beautiful, and unlike you, she quickly gave us a child. I really envy William."
With such words, dripping with sarcasm, they began to confront me directly. Christopher was no different. "It's true.
Maybe we should just kick out a woman who can't bear children and live here with William's family instead."
He casually made such selfish remarks. By this time, even I started thinking that leaving this house and separating from David could be an option, given we had no children. Right around then, Kayla became pregnant with her second child. Brittany's grandchild fever grew even more intense, and correspondingly, her treatment of me became harsher. And somehow, under a complete misunderstanding.
"Isn't it because you're cheating that you can't have children? You're just worried you won't know if it's David's or your lover's child."
This ludicrous theory emerged. I was so dumbfounded I didn't even respond, but one evening at dinner, I noticed Brittany looking at me with a particularly snide expression. Confused, I asked her what was wrong, and she said,
"You really were cheating, weren't you?" "Just as I suspected."
When Christopher and David asked what she meant, she proudly declared,
"I've caught Misty cheating on camera. I hired a professional, so it's undeniable."
She then burst into laughter, seemingly pleased with herself. Hearing this, Christopher and David looked shocked at first, but, influenced by Brittany's confidence, said,
"If that's true, then it's divorce."
"Of course.
And she'll have to pay a hefty compensation,"
matching Brittany's malicious grin. "Therefore,
I understand. Then, at Mike's birthday party next week, which we have planned, I will explain the situation to all the relatives myself."
That's what I announced. The birthday party Brittany arranged for Mike was extravagant, as expected, renting out an entire restaurant. The invited relatives seemed somewhat weary of Brittany's boasting but appeared to enjoy the food and drinks. As the party drew to a close, I took the microphone and stepped forward, drawing everyone's attention.
"I have a brief report to make to everyone who has gathered here today,"
I began. Beside the slightly murmuring crowd, Christopher, Brittany, and David, thinking I was about to admit my faults and discuss divorce, smirked maliciously, just like before. William's family did the same. I signaled to the staff, and a screen was lowered behind me. As a projector was brought in and the lights dimmed, a video began to play to the focused attention of everyone. The video started with scenes of what seemed to be a dodgy hotel district, and as it zoomed in on the entrance of one hotel, the complexions of David, Christopher, and Kayla, as expected, began to sour. Unaware of what was happening, Brittany looked on curiously, not noticing the troubled expressions of the three. The next moment, a gasp of surprise erupted from the relatives as the camera clearly captured a scene. And for good reason. The screen showed Kayla and Christopher emerging from a hotel, locked in an embrace. The room fell silent as the two of them shared a lingering, passionate hug, replayed in close-up. When they got into a taxi, the screen switched back to the same hotel entrance. This time, however, it was David, not Christopher, who appeared hand in hand with Kayla. David, Christopher, and Kayla were frozen, muttering, What the? The room erupted into murmurs again. I paused the playback, turned the lights back on, and began speaking into the microphone. The report I have for everyone is straightforward. As you've just seen, David and Christopher have been cheating with Kayla. This evidence was thoroughly documented by the investigation firm Brittany hired. I said, raising a thick file of documents for all to see, prompting another wave of murmurs. I waited for silence before revealing that the investigation firm wasn't hired to catch Christopher, David, and Kayla's infidelity, but to find evidence of my supposed cheating, as per Brittany's wish, likely instigated by David. Probably David, finding me in the way, filled her head with baseless accusations. Accepting such tales without question is questionable in itself. I added, inducing light laughter among the relatives, who then looked at David and Brittany with disdain. Brittany, having received a report from the investigation firm, declared victory over catching me cheating, without checking the evidence. Unfortunately for her, I had no such skeletons in my closet. I continued, projecting a photo onto the screen. It was a snapshot taken at the hospital when Mike was born, featuring Kayla holding Mike in the center, with a smiling William beside her, and me and David visible in the background, having come to congratulate them. I've always been disliked by Brittany, so she probably didn't have a single photo where I was clearly visible. She sent this snapshot to the investigators with a note, "Catch my son's wife cheating," thinking it would serve as evidence. As I glanced sideways at Brittany, her shocked expression seemed to confirm the story. However, the investigation firm mistook Kayla, the woman holding the child, to be the wife of Brittany's son they were supposed to investigate. Upon starting their investigation, they unexpectedly caught Christopher and David repeatedly visiting hotels with Kayla. Thus, the investigation firm, thinking William was the husband in question, informed Brittany that they had captured the evidence on camera. Brittany naturally assumed it was evidence of my infidelity. However, when suddenly confronted with claims of having proof of my affair, I was initially shocked, but then remembered something specific. The name of the investigation firm on the family credit card statement used by Brittany. In fact, Brittany, a spendthrift, had made a family card under my name for her use, supposedly for when her own credit limit was insufficient. As she made large purchases without consulting me, I had set up the card statements to be viewable on the app to check the monthly charges. So, the next day, I took a half-day off to visit the investigation firm I found online to explain the situation. I then requested an investigation from them. They readily agreed to take on the investigation to make up for their mistake, and quickly provided the results. After the screen was removed and the lights were brightly turned back on, Kayla, Christopher, and David all looked pale. I approached a great-uncle and aunt, feared most by Christopher and Brittany, from among the relatives. I'd prefer the children, especially Mike, not to hear what comes next. Could someone please take them to another room? That's what I requested. The great-uncle and aunt approached Kayla, took Mike, and handed him over to one of their children and their spouse. Following this, other children were led away by some of the women to another room, leaving the furious relatives, a stunned Brittany and William, and a visibly shaking Christopher, David, and Kayla. Then, Brittany, who had been shaking with anger, stormed up to Kayla and yelled,
"What have you done? Betraying me and William, with Christopher and David."
She attempted to grab Kayla, causing several relatives to hastily intervene, but Kayla was visibly terrified by her expression. Christopher and David looked just as scared. However, I decided to launch the final fireworks against them.
Regrettably, under these circumstances, I will be divorcing David. I apologize for troubling everyone until the end. According to the investigation firm, the inappropriate relationships involving these three didn't just begin yesterday. A reconciliation of the marriage is impossible. Saying so, I covered half my face with a handkerchief. Ever since learning about the investigation results, I can't help but think, perhaps Mike, and even the child Kayla is currently carrying, could be Christopher's or maybe David's. It's been incredibly hard to bear. I staggered slightly, perhaps laying it on a bit thick, and the women remaining in the room rushed to my side, patting my back and supporting me. How shameless can you get? Disgusting!
Poor thing. They started berating the three. The men looked on with contempt, surrounding the trio with cold stares. Christopher and David turned pale under their gazes, silent, while Brittany's ranting and Kayla's sobbing were the only sounds echoing in the room. The aftermath of the fireworks I set off spread far and wide. Learning that his wife and brother had affairs with his father, William was initially in shock, but soon began to seriously consider the possibility of cuckoldry I had suggested.
It's got to be a lie! Mike and the baby in my womb are unquestionably your children.
Kayla pleaded desperately, but once a seed of doubt is planted, it doesn't disappear with a few words. Stealing away Kayla's attention, William used a paternity test kit he ordered to discover the children were not his. Even when confronted with the results, Kayla staunchly refused to admit to cuckoldry, driving William to contact Kayla's parents. Unexpectedly, her parents, unsatisfied with just William's story, came to my workplace seeking an explanation for the entire affair. Though it felt like a hassle, I saw it as a necessary procedure and took the next day off to meet with Kayla's parents, Kayla, and William at the law firm I had hired. After showing them the relevant documents and the infamous video, Kayla's parents were speechless. Seeing this, William boasted,
"See? I told you Kayla betrayed me, having affairs with my brother and father. It's clear neither Mike nor the unborn child are mine."
However, the lawyer clarified.
Could we leave that discussion for those directly involved? We called you here today not to determine the father of the children, but to discuss claiming compensation from your wife as David's mistress.
William was taken aback by the blunt statement. Of course, it was expected. I found it hard to comprehend why the lawyer I hired would need to side with William. But more than that, Kayla and her parents were the ones truly shocked.
I won't pay any compensation. It was you, being all about your work and an unaffectionate wife, that drove David to cheat with me. It's your fault, not ours.
Kayla retorted mockingly, but I replied,
Is that so? Then we have no choice but to let a third party decide who's right. Perhaps a judge?
At that, it was Kayla's parents who turned pale. And no wonder, as both of Kayla's parents are teachers at a prestigious girls' school in the region, known for its commitment to nurturing homemakers. The scandal of their daughter involved an assorted affair with her Bil and Fael, leading to a lawsuit for compensation, could easily bring disgrace upon them. As soon as I mentioned the possibility of court, Kayla's parents practically dragged her down from the sofa to the floor. "We're truly sorry. We'll take full responsibility for the compensation if you file a claim." Kayla's father, Brian, pleaded earnestly while apologizing deeply. However, apologies at this point meant nothing to me, regardless of who they came from. I signaled the lawyer with a glance and left the room. Later, the lawyer informed me that William, Kayla, and her parents caused quite a commotion afterwards, but they finally left after being sternly told by the lawyer that the police would be called if they didn't leave immediately. Subsequently, perhaps as a gesture to ensure silence, Kayla's parents transferred nearly twice the amount of the demanded compensation through the lawyer. After that, what became of William and Kayla was of no concern to me, but I learned about the fate of the entire in-law family through David, who also demanded compensation and property distribution from me. According to David, William filed for divorce and demanded compensation from Kayla. Furthermore, he refused to pay child support for Mike and the unborn child unless DNA testing proved they were his. He even declared he would contest paternity immediately after the birth. Kayla's parents, anxious despite my situation being resolved smoothly, forced a reluctant Kayla to undergo prenatal testing. The fetus turned out to be David's child, not William's. And shockingly, Christopher was Mike's father. Brittany, devastated to learn her beloved grandson Mike was actually her husband's son, suffered a mental breakdown and has since aged rapidly, becoming almost bedridden, with Christopher providing constant care. William, however, has demanded compensation from Christopher and David for causing the breakdown of his marriage. Furthermore, to Christopher, he said, "If you cannot pay the compensation, then we can offset it against your inheritance. But in that case, I will not take care of any of you in your old age. Let David handle everything." That's what he apparently declared. However, William made it clear he would not care for them in their old age, leaving all responsibilities to David. Thus, faced with the prospect of losing his inheritance, Christopher and Brittany, abandoned by William, seemed desperate not to let David slip away. However, David himself was being pressured by Kayla, who had been divorced by William. "Now that it's come to this, you'll have to take responsibility for me and the baby in my belly." She demanded remarriage from him. "I'm sorry for everything up till now. I apologize, so please, let's start over. I love you, Misty," he begged, but it was clear he was not seeking my love but a return to financial stability and a wife who would dutifully serve his family for free. Having no lingering feelings for David, I instructed him through the lawyer again and blocked all contact, save for one social media account. The divorce was finalized after some contention, but the compensation and property distribution were paid in full in 2 installments. According to the lawyer, Kayla continued to live in the in-laws' house, acting as if she were David's wife. But they became known as the shameless family among the neighbors, leading to their seclusion. With Kayla neither helping with Brittany's care nor looking after Mike and the newborn, the kindergarten, concerned about Mike's unkempt appearance, reported them to Child Protective Services. In the end, Kayla's parents, who rushed over, took the 2 children, but to Kayla, "You are no longer our daughter, nor are we your parents. Never show your face to us again," they said. With nowhere left to turn, Kayla, like Christopher and Brittany, became wholly dependent on David. It seems he's struggling to support 4 adults, including his mother in need of care, on his single income. That's what it was. Moreover, a colleague from the same company as David mentioned. The story, even with embellishments, has spread, making him the worst man worthy of a compilation video site, a subject of rumors. But he continues to work there, unable to quit due to financial reasons, and feeling out of place. As for William, he seemed to regard me as a fellow victim. Though he had previously demeaned me along with Kayla, Christopher, and Brittany as a woman who wouldn't even bury her children. Naturally, I ignored him at work, but when the rumors somehow reached our company, unable to bear the gossip, William voluntarily transferred to a subsidiary in the countryside. After everything was settled, I was approached about a transfer to an overseas branch. Although I had always hoped to work abroad since my interview, the offer came as a surprise. However, encouraged by my supervisors for the career I had built and my language skills learned in my spare time, and tired of being the subject of sympathy and rumors, I decided to accept the offer. Hearing this, David, from whom I hadn't blocked the only remaining social media, sent a barrage of cliched messages begging for reconciliation, but planning to cancel my mobile phone upon leaving here. I ignored them. Despite everything, cutting ties with that in-law family felt like a stroke of luck. Thinking about it, I felt ready to face any challenges that might come, surprising myself with my own resilience. Realizing I had been too self-deprecating before, I resolved to approach the future with optimism and determination.